success. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's made a generous contribution to the Nashville Rotary Service Trust's annual Footprint Fund. Part of your contribution will help buy food, the food that we will distribute next December. You can still make a contribution to the fund by check or online at nashvillerotary.org. On December the 16th, the Board of Directors met, and I want to congratulate Lisa Forelli, who was elected President-elect nominee and will serve as president after Lauren Lane Payne beginning on July 1st, 2022. We are honored to have Chief of Police John Drake, a Rotarian, as our speaker today. Before the pandemic, many Rotarians walked down historic 2nd Avenue each Monday on their way to the Rotary meeting, and it was shocking to see the pictures of the tremendous damage done by the bombing on Christmas Day. We are thankful to the 6 heroic police officers who worked to evacuate the area and to save many lives. Nashville is resilient, and we look forward to that walk down an even better 2nd Avenue someday soon. I hope you all watched the Titans win yesterday. I'm sure there are cardiologists across the city that are doing a bang-up business today. I know that we all look forward to seeing a playoff win at home against the Ravens this Sunday. Please join me for the 4-way test of the things that we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Now, President-elect nominee Lisa Forelli is going to bring us her invocation and pledge to the flag.
Thank you, President Richard. Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we give thanks for this new day and new year and the chance to come together in fellowship. We ask that you be with us every day and provide your guidance and grace. Help us to listen, learn, and remain hopeful, even as we face obstacles and challenges. Help us to show kindness and compassion to others. We pray for good health and safety and ask your blessing for those who are sick and facing hardships. God, we offer a special prayer for our friend John Drake and all of the first responders who keep our city safe. Keep them safe and continue to give them wisdom, courage, and compassion. Amen. Please join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lisa. Please, for our presentation, use the chat or question and answer feature for any questions you have today. Olivia will read as many questions as time allows following the presentation. Questions are limited to Rotary members. You could also email her at olivia@nashvillerotary.org. Now, Lydia Linker will bring our presenter, Chief John Drake.
Well, thank you, President Richard, and Happy New Year to all of you. John Drake has served as Nashville's Chief of Police for 36 days. On day 26, Christmas Day, he and his department faced a first, an intentional act of horrific violence perpetrated with resounding consequences for our city, the region, and the country. But Drake is neither new to the force or to Nashville as he meets this challenge and begins enacting his vision for the department. His law enforcement career spans 32 years in Music City. Let me take you through the chronology. It is impressive. Patrol officer, narcotics units in the Vice Division, Police Athletic League, where he launched new programs and grew youth participation from 100 to 1,300 in 5 years. Promotion to sergeant, patrol supervisor at the North Precinct, investigator at Office of Professional Accountability. Promotion to lieutenant, head of investigations unit at the Hermitage Precinct. Promotion to captain, overnight field supervisor, head of the Domestic Violence Division as its first male captain. Appointed commander of the Central Precinct. That's Nashville's downtown business and entertainment district. I want to note that in 2016, John Drake became a member of the Rotary Club of Nashville. Appointed deputy chief over the Support Services Bureau, overseeing more than 10 divisions of the department. Appointed deputy chief of the Community Service, said that already. Appointed interim chief this past August, and appointed as the 8th chief of police of the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department on November 30th. As for hobbies, well, I went to look at his Rotary bio when I found out that John Drake enjoys golf, travel, and a good cigar. Welcome, Chief Drake, and congratulations to you. We so appreciate you taking the time today to kick off the new year with us.
Hey, thank you so much for that introduction, Lydia. I had forgotten that I had told people I like a good cigar occasionally, but I do. Thank you, fellow Rotarians. Looking forward to this presentation today. Happy New Year. Hoping 2021 is a lot better than 2020. It's an honor to speak to you today. 2020, we saw a tornado rip through the city, followed by a pandemic that is ongoing today, followed with civil unrest. Then from civil unrest, my appointment as chief, and thinking it was going to be a honeymoon period where I got to know everyone and shake hands and kiss babies, all that stuff, as they say, and none of that occurred. We had some tragic situations that happened, which I'll get to. So in my presentation today, I'll speak a little bit about me, what we've been doing, and some things that are currently ongoing. And so I'll start with myself. And a lot of people don't know me really, but I'm a native Nashvilleian. I grew up in East Nashville, went to the public school system all the way through, walked most of my school days, except for the 7th grade where I was bused to Bailey Junior High School. From there, I was a 3-sport letterman in my high school. I played football, I wrestled, I ran track. I was a very good student. I was the class vice president, was actually nominated as most outstanding in my class. In fact, I was elected to 11 superlatives and had my choice of picking any from most athletic to most outstanding. So I chose most outstanding. I graduated from Bethel University, summa cum laude, which is highest of honors. Always been really a book rat. My parents, as I was a kid, had to come home and do my homework. Immediately when I got home, growing up in the inner city, problems around in the neighborhood, I think that was their way of keeping me out of trouble and keeping me focused on school. I mention that because I didn't have the traditional childhood as most kids. My father was blind. He's still my hero today. I lost him to cancer about 10 years ago. And then my mom was disabled. So I didn't have anyone to actually help me with my studies, but I had to come in, do my homework. And from there, I got involved with sports. And in fact, the 3 other kids that I walked to school with wound up getting in trouble with the law. And their lives were, adversely impacted by their decisions. So I'm forever grateful for my parents and what they had me do. As Lydia mentioned, I've been on the police department for 32 years. March 16th, March the 33rd year. I've had many great assignments throughout my career. I've won numerous accommodations. I've actually had a life-saving award where I was looking for a lost child and was actually able to rescue some people from a fire. It's the first time that I was ever noted in the media as a hero, so it's kind of it's a cool job, I think, and it's one that I have embraced my entire career. I oversaw the Police Athletic League, where I built a sports program, basketball in particular, from 100 kids to over 1,200. It was so well noted that the National Football League came from New York City, sent a representative down, and was so impressed with the program that they wanted to help with something in Nashville. And so they gave a large donation to help build the Litton football field and stadium. Them, along with a private donor, built, I think, one of the nicest public high school football stadiums in the city. I believe it was somewhere over $500,000. So very honored at that. When I look at kids that came through the Police Athletic League, they're now principals in high schools, assistant principals. Some are professional athletes playing in the NFL, have one still playing basketball in overseas. And I stay in communication with them. So it's actually a great program to want to mix and mingle with kids, but actually to see how they progress through the years. Being appointed as chief is a definite honor. It's one that I take serious. It's came during a pandemic where we had the enforcement efforts of the public health order, which is not a very popular thing, but the coronavirus continued surging, and at one time, the Broadway area in the downtown core was considered the epicenter of where the virus was being transmitted. And so I and myself went down to Broadway in the downtown core to enforce the order, putting ourselves in harm's way, but more in particular, the men and women who did it every day. I did it occasionally, but not every day, to try and mitigate this virus that continues to be ongoing today. Followed that with a surge in violent crime, which is something that we've seen around the country, and in particular here in Nashville. Our homicides are up by 40%. And then with a bomb detonation, just unbelievable, the events that we've been through. But as I became appointed, the first thing I wanted to do was change the culture of the department and move away from what some people perceive as a warrior mindset, which was only calls for service, going into neighborhoods and not really getting to know people, to more of a guardian mindset. That was already being established somewhat, but I wanted to take it to a higher level. When you look at policing, policing has always been oppressive, even from the very history of its origin when it became with slave patrols. And throughout the years, enforcing Jim Crow laws and et cetera, something that, my parents had to go through, riding down the back of a bus or going in the back of a movie theater or not being able to sit at a lunch counter and having to deal with the enforcement actions of law enforcement is really oppressive. So in 2004, we shifted away from a reactive model of policing, which we had Chief Surpass come in and he wanted to do proactive policing. And so that meant the creation of flex teams and crime suppression teams. Those teams were designed to go into areas and reduce crime by making traffic stops, Terry stops, warrant attempts, and just being in areas where you're not really getting to know people, but you're enforcing all of these things. And you make an arrest and you leave in neighborhoods, and it created a void, I believe, because people really, one, through history, viewed us adversely, but then also these actions, I think, made it even more so. And so we began focusing on community engagement. And so we dismantled flex teams, crime suppression teams, and made them community engagement, all with the sole intention of getting to know people, going into areas, and then focusing on problem people. People in communities know where their problems are. They don't need the police department to come in and say, hey, this is your problem. In fact, we'd rather hear it from our communities to say, hey, this house or this neighbor or these people are creating these problems. And then we can focus on them, not to try to arrest our way out of situations, but to see how we can collaborate with others, how we can have interventions to keep people from going down a criminal path. And so the whole goal was to build a friendlier, more engaging police department that had really gave people a sense of community. We took the crime suppression teams, and we made them community field intelligence teams, which instead of going out and what some people perceived as harassing neighborhoods, we went out and I found information about people that were creating problems and how we could intervene. One, if someone came on our radar that we knew was going to have a criminal path, but they had not yet crossed that threshold, we wanted to try to put them with interventions, with groups that could prevent them from going down the system. And so we partnered with people that traditionally we hadn't done in the past. But then we also, had they crossed that threshold, to be able to make that arrest, to try to get them in the system, and then hopefully there will be some rehabilitation on down. So the whole goal of community engagement, in my opinion, is to build relationships. The community, when you look at national incidents or even locally, people fear what they don't know, and that includes police officers. So officers that may come from areas going into vulnerable communities may not know how to interact with people, and so they have a inherent fear. And people also have that fear when they see a police officer. They wonder, what are they going to do to them? Are they going to pull me over in a traffic stop and shoot me? Or are they going to take my dad to jail or take my brother to jail? Are they going to call me bad names? But if we put people together so they can get to know each other, then I think it causes a better and more coherent community. With officers out walking, officers on UTVs, having conversations with people, getting to know everyone in the neighborhoods, helping to organize cleanups. We had an area in South Nashville where it was riddled with prostitution and drugs, and we organized a cleanup in this area. And there was a lady, and she said she was a recovering addict and that she felt she was going to relapse. And she went out to see that the neighborhood had been clean. There was officers in the area communicating with people, and that all the stuff that was made her feel a sense of that she was going to relapse was gone. And she felt so strongly about it. She wanted to send an email to the police department thanking us, saying that she felt empowered. She was going to keep the neighborhood clean, her and neighbors. They was going to keep the element away by calling the police and working with us. And she felt like she still had control of her life, where she felt like she was about to lose it. It also gives us an avenue to tutor kids at the Midtown Hills precinct, Madison precinct, and others. We've had kids come in, especially with virtual learning due to COVID, been able to be tutored by school resource officers and others to help them with their schoolwork, where they may not have this support network at home. Officers have been helping with that. So much so the Titans, Tennessee Titans, and Go Titans for those that like them, would like to be more involved with that program, maybe in the off season, to see how they can partner with us and how we can better interact with kids too. Another effort of community engagement is, how do we engage our vulnerable and displaced homeless population? And so we started quality of life teams, and quality of life team was designed to connect our displaced members of our community with services to help get them off the street, who are dealing with drugs, alcoholism, other addictions, and mental health issues. And we've seen success with that. We've seen an overall drop in crime in the downtown core, but we've also seen individuals being moved into affordable housing. And so that's a plus, and more so than we've ever seen before. So we're moving people off the street by just making these connections. I've also had communications with Judy Tackett, the Homeless Impact Division, about all the groups coming together to work collaboratively to help. And I think this has also played a role. And something that I learned when I was in domestic violence is that so many people wanted a good cause at the end of the day, but they was all working out of different silos. And the domestic violence community learned that as you came together to work together in a collaborative fashion, then a lot more could be accomplished for those that you're trying to serve. So it took that same mindset for our homeless and displaced. And so far, I think it's good. One of the new things we've done, and I'm not sure of many police department or any really that's done it around the country, is that we created the position of a chief diversity officer. We took a captain. He's as a high level employee in the department. He's Hispanic to oversee, to be our chief diversity officer. One, to maintain our connection with the Community Oversight Board, which is one of the priorities I had as I was as interim and as appointed, is that they were supported by the community by over 130,000 votes. And so I wanted to make sure that we gave the community what they wanted and gave the COB the ability to look at us, to investigate any officer misconduct, but also have oversight over the department. It only builds trust and helps with the legitimacy of the department, but also interaction with NOAA and other groups as well. This captain also oversees our newly formed division of Office of Community Engagement and Partnerships. And so this is a very diverse group of officers, male, female, Hispanic, Laotian, Kurdish, etc., all with the idea of connecting more with communities that we traditionally haven't had a lot of communication with. It's seeing great inroads in the Hispanic community. We're seeing great inroads with the Muslim community, who in fact told us that they hadn't had much interaction with the police department since 2004. And so we're honored to start building those relationships and those connections to a community that not only wants to be involved with the police department, but they also want to see how they can make so much of a connection that their community can have officers on the police department, which helps our overall diversity, helps us with that community as well. We also created an interpersonal crimes branch, which I haven't heard of any around the country, but I think it's something that's needed for this police department as we try to build the model agency. It's still a lot that we have to do. It's only been 36 days since my appointment, but it feels like it's been a year. So with the interpersonal crimes branch, the theory behind that is to take a commander and have them oversee captain in the domestic violence division with victims of domestic assault, abuse, with youth services, with youth victims and suspects, how we can focus on that. And not just kids that are victims of crimes, but also chronic kids that are suspects in crimes, how we can collaborate with more groups to try to keep them away from the pipeline to prison phenomenon. But then also sex assault and trafficking. What we learned, as I said earlier, in the domestic violence division, as we all came together and worked more collaboratively, we found out a lot more and decreased the gaps and had an increase in communications. And so if you have a lady or someone who is in a relationship who is being abused domestically, but also may have kids that are being abused and may later become involved in crime, but then also is being trafficked, all those groups can be in communication with each other. What I think is going to be a national best practice, and probably we'll have others looking at that to see if this is indeed the right way. I had a meeting with a group, and it was an international group. When I announced that we were going to do this, they immediately started saying, "I wish that our police chief would do that in our city, that we had the support from our police chief." And I don't look at it from that aspect, but other than just trying to provide the best services we can for our community. Shifting to our crime, a vast majority of our crime is another area that we're concerned about. It's committed by juveniles and young adults aged 15 to 24. We've seen that age group get younger. It's gotten to 12 and 13-year-olds more often. And we've seen as young as some 10-year-olds that have been involved in car theft, weapon possession, and other, in fact, violent crime. And in one week in particular, which it was really alarming to me and became something I wanted to focus on even more. In this particular week, we had officers working the public health order downtown. They approached the vehicle, which was a truck. Turned out to be a stolen vehicle. As the officer approached the vehicle, a gun went off. The officer immediately drew his gun, ordered them out of the vehicle, et cetera. And without incident, without anyone being harmed, turned out to be a 12 and 14-year-old that were in a stolen truck, and the truck had a gun in it. In the very same week, we had an incident up on the interstate where a 12 and 14-year-old were murdered. It was a gunshot incident where a 16 and 14-year-old on the back seat got into some type of altercation, fighting over a gun, and all four wound up being shot, two fatally. And so that vehicle was also stolen and had a stolen gun, and all under the age of 16. And so you wonder, these incidents happened after 1 a.m. One was at 1 a.m. and one was at 3 a.m. Why do we have 12 and 14 or really 16-year-olds out riding around in stolen vehicles with guns, and no one is asking where they are and what's going on? And so my thoughts with the juvenile justice system, and something that I am beginning to focus on now, is beginning the collaborations as how we can intervene more and have communications with families. Obviously, there's a breakdown in the family, but also how we can work with juvenile court. I've had discussion with Judge Calloway. With the adult system, I've had discussions with Judge Rachel Bell, and how we can do more. And so those talks will be coming up very soon, how we can service more to try to prevent some of these crimes from occurring, but also how we can connect more with families. A big issue that we've had come up and really with civil unrest is the notion of abolish and defund the police. And so I wanted to talk about that just briefly as we talk about defunding. I won't go into abolishing that much, but I really understand what people mean when they say defund and moving resources to other avenues. And I really think we can do that to a certain degree, but in a collaborative fashion. But when we look at our police department, we're allocated for 1,511 officers. We have 1,411, so we're 100 short. Even if we had the full allocation of the 1,511, we would still be about 300 officers short of what we need to keep this city safe. And that's been the whole goal of recruiting thus far, is trying to get to where we can have a fully staffed police department, to where we can move up to help more. But when you defund, you take monies away to move them to social services or other aspects. 90% of our budget is personnel. And so if we cut funding to any degree, we're going to have to cut officers. And we will put our city, and I feel, in a less advantageous situation dealing with the community and being able to provide the best services possible. Combined with that, we only have 156 female officers, and only 24 of those officers are African-American females. Definitely something that we need to work on, and we have been. And so since my appointment, that's another thing we've been working on, is that we pull officers out of patrol and put them in a recruitment section. Historically, when people wanted to sign up for the police department, they went to a website, clicked on links, and found us, and we got back to them and did a background investigation, et cetera. But we started a diverse group of officers, male, female, African-American, so forth, all in the efforts of being more intentional about still casting a wide net for everyone, but being more intentional about bringing in women and minorities in this police department. So we've actually had discussions with our female members here about their importance, about how they contribute to the community, but also how they can network with friends and try to get some of their friends to join the police department. Was also doing that with our African American and minority members of the police department, to have them connect with people as well, universities, fraternities, sororities, etc., so we can build a police department more reflective of the community. Why I talk about that is, if we don't have a diverse police department, then we can't promote diversity throughout the ranks. As you get up into the upper echelons of the police department, you want to represent the community you serve, but also in all the layers, whether it's sergeant, lieutenant, captain, etc. You want to be able to show that women and minorities are in leadership roles, and that fuels a synergy for other people. And so I started a campaign within the police department, and it's just about embracing our women officers, embracing our minorities, highlighting them in social media to show that what they're doing. We're going to do even more of that moving forward, and I think it's going to be have a great effect for us. One of our current challenges is violent crime. As I said earlier, homicides are up 40%, aggravated assaults are up, stolen vehicles are up from about 200 more than what we had last year. Vehicles been stolen out of, guns been stolen out of vehicles is also up. All that is interconnected. When someone steals a car, has a gun in it or steals a gun, now they have a vehicle to get around town. They can commit crime a lot easier with this. And so I've talked to a senator, I've talked to people in Washington, D.C. about doing something with irresponsible gun owners. I have nothing against gun ownership. I think it's great to be a gun owner. But for irresponsible gun owners that leave guns in cars, I really think we need to do more to hold them accountable and look at ways how we can mitigate that effort. With our homicides being up, another thing that we started with the police department is we centralized a homicide team. In 2004, it had been decentralized to all the precincts, meaning that, although each precinct had investigators, someone may be assigned a homicide and at the same time be assigned a burglary or a theft from vehicle, and say that burglary had hotter leads at the time and the detective needed to follow that. It takes away from the investigation of what I think is an ultimate crime. So we centralized that unit, bringing them all back to headquarters, the best of the best, with 1 lieutenant, 4 sergeants, 24 detectives to work in teams of 6. And so as they go out on a homicide or a shooting, they can actually get more information. They can glean it quicker. They can interview more people. And then we started a team that went back after violent crime incidents to re-canvass areas. Those units consist of gun crime detectives, gang detectives, and crime scene investigators. All that, in my theory, I believe when a homicide occurs or fatal shooting, all the pieces to the puzzle are there. You have a victim, you have a suspect, you have the motive, you have witnesses, you have evidence, all of it's there. And then over time, it dissipates and becomes cold. And since we put together this homicide unit, in everyone that we've had thus far, we have leads on all the cases except for one that happened out in the southeast portion of town. And they've cleared a lot of homicides so far. In fact, the clearance rate had dipped in about the 48th percentile. We're hoping to get it up above 80%, which is a huge jump for our unit. And I think it's one that's it's going to be attainable. That actually helped with the tragic incident as we get to current events, the fatal shooting of the nurse on the interstate. Had very little to go on. We had no camera footage. We had no license plate reader technology to give tag information of who might have been in the area of this particular crime. But we did have a group of detectives that all could go out collaboratively and partner together with our gun crime crew, gangs, and et cetera, was able to quickly determine a suspect and was able to make an arrest. We've actually had that happen on quite a few cases. We've had the question asked, was this only done because of the nurse? And that's not the case. We do that on all of our cases, except some come to fruition sooner than others. We've had some that's been solved within 24 hours. We had a fatal shooting last night in Target in the west section of town, and actually have a suspect in custody. It's going to be cleared out. And so that's really my goals is diversity and overall growth, connecting more with the community, especially in vulnerable neighborhoods with those that feel underserved. And finally, in closing, talk a little bit about the bombing incident. I was shocked when I got the call. I really had been working all year. One of several police officers in this department that really haven't been able to take advantage of being off or take excused vacation time. And so I was looking forward to having 3 days off. And I got a call from one of the deputy chiefs, actually, Christmas morning, about 6 a.m., and telling me what happened. I remember staring at the ceiling, and a few minutes after that, Don Aaron called me, and told me, "Hey, it's not a propane leak," which is what I was thinking it was. Maybe someone was camping, trying to keep warm. It was really cold, and that it was an unfortunate incident, but it was unintentional. But what it turned out to be was intentional. I went downtown and I looked at 2nd Avenue, and I couldn't believe my eyes. It looked like somebody had dropped a bomb out of a plane, and it landed right on 2nd Avenue. And you had fire, you had buildings that were destroyed, you had cars that was destroyed, you had trees in the middle of the road, like it was in the middle of a war zone. And I remember just looking at water flying everywhere and sirens going off. And when it just felt like I was in a area that was under siege. And so I say that to say we had a destruction, and that's horrible because it's a historical area. But I want to give credit to the men and women who responded that morning. They responded to a shots fired call, not knowing what they were going to encounter. If they were going to encounter someone with a weapon and have to engage, or what unknown factors they were going into. They see an RV that's making announcements that a bomb is going to detonate. Music would play, and I know they felt it was surreal. A countdown would occur, and they took upon themselves to make sure they went and knocked on doors and got as many people out as they could. And what turned out to be, we didn't have any human injuries that we know of thus far. One unsung hero, in addition to the 6 officers, was an officer that lived in one of the buildings on 2nd Avenue. He recently gotten engaged and had bought down on 2nd Avenue. And he gave the officers information on how to contact everyone within the buildings to help expedite everyone exiting the building. What would have happened had he not been able to be there to help? No one knows, but it's someone that we plan to recognize as well. When that building was hit, it hit near, when an area was hit, it hit near the AT&T building. And that building became flooded from its sprinkler systems, and the generators went out, causing people that had service with AT&T to lose service for about 48 hours. Being a first responder, I'm a member of what they call FirstNet, which elevates you above all of that to be able to have continued communications for first responders. After a few hours, that went out as well. So now not only do we have a city that has AT&T out, but we have a police department that is mostly AT&T that is out. So we're scrambling for some of the members to get additional service phones. So moving forward with some of the new deputy chiefs, new command members, they'll all have an additional service provider outside of AT&T in case this incident ever happened again. Fortunately for me, I already had AT&T and Verizon to be able to use. But unfortunately, I had an issue, and they had the issue with the Verizon phone. They had to bring me another one. This response garnered attention all over the world. From the moment the officers gave their account of what happened and their heroism, I remember standing there, and the officers said group hug, and they wanted to embrace each other. And I wanted to join in, and they said, "Come on, Chief," and I'm in too. And so someone snaps a picture of us embracing, and this picture goes around the world. It's featured in New York Times. It's featured in Canada and France, so much to the degree that I had a young man, a 13-year-old young man, with the help of his father, send me an email to say thank you for the men and women of Nashville, that he had been following the incident, and that he just felt compelled to write a letter saying how important it was of what we did to save people. I felt so compelled that I sent him a gift, some mementos from the police department, thanking him. But that's what we've had from around the country, being inundated with calls and emails to support. And I know it's not something that our men and women wanted, but it's something that we take, and we're honored to be able to serve our community. So as we go from response to recovery, this is going to take a long time. There are at least 3 buildings that are not suitable for occupancy. I think about 7 buildings total considered unsafe. There are sewer lines that are clay pipes that have to be examined to see what damage is done. Other utilities, structural engineers have had to come in to assess the property. Each individual owner of businesses and resident downtown is going to have their own structural engineer come in along with their insurance agent and contractors. And so we're in the middle of the recovery now, and it's going to take years to come. But I'll say this as my final statement, and I'm proud to be a Nashvilleian, but we are a resilient city. We are a resilient community. There's a reason why they call Tennessee the volunteer state. And that's a reason why incident after incident, we say we are Nashville, and we are Nashville strong. We will rebound even better. Thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions.
Chief Drake, thank you so much. We have our chat and Q&A lines are busy, and so we'll get to as many questions as we can. You've answered some of them along the way. So let me start. Harry Allen, who I'm sure you know is our immediate past president, is with Studio Bank, has a question about, he says, what is your most critical need? Is it funding, recruiting diverse talent, stronger community partnerships, or is it something else?
I believe it's all of that. One of the biggest issues is diversity and recruiting more talent, but also connecting with the communities. I feel when we look at our violent crime, especially homicides, it's not just a police problem. It's a community problem. And it's something that we have to work closely together with. And so we're going to have volunteers from the community that sit on advisory panels. We'll have stakeholders from the community, district attorneys, other members of the community that's going to play a vital role in helping us with this. And funding never hurts. I'm going to ask for more funding. We're a short-staffed police department, but one way around that is one, not only to build a bigger police department. If we add 100 officers to this department, that's about $17 million more that we'll need in the budget. But also, we need more funding for overtime operations to put more officers in communities to better serve as well. So I intend to ask for more funding. Those will be the top two priorities.
All right, this next question is from Joanne Pullis. Joanne leads the HCA Foundation and is also a board member of our Rotary Club. She says, Chief Drake, so grateful to you for your leadership. Looking to the future, how do you and will you continue to use data to drive your decisions? For example, what is your perspective on the significant increase in violent crime that we are witnessing?
Yeah, continue to use data because you have to have metrics to see if you're successful or not. But I don't want metrics to be our only tool. I want to use metrics to see how we built our collaborations with the community, how that interaction is going, how we don't go in communities and telling them what they need, but how they can tell us what we can do to help them and partnering more with them. And so that data becomes important when you look at areas. When we look at problem people and problem areas, we look at micro communities. Very few people create a majority of the crime. And a lot of that happens in small circles. And so as we can look at these areas, look at the people, and we can use that data to help alleviate that problem, but also not over police areas.
All right, our next question is from Cyril Stewart, who is a preservation architect. Cyril says, in the days following the Christmas Day bombing, the FBI secured the site. Have they turned the site over to MNPD? How long do you anticipate 2nd Avenue will be shut down? And do you anticipate a continued involvement by the state or feds?
Absolutely. So that was turned over to us last Thursday afternoon, New Year's Eve at about 3:30 p.m. From the federal government to the city. The FBI is still involved, and the ATF is still involved in the evidence collection down there. There's still quite a bit to go through. The area has been condensed from 5th Avenue to the river to just mainly 2nd Avenue and 1st Avenue, from Union to Broad. But when this explosion occurred, it sent particles everywhere as far as Nissan Stadium. Huge. And so we had to do a lot of evidence collection. Some of that were remains of individual that we had to send out for DNA to confirm his involvement. We feel 2nd Avenue is going to be shut down for some time to come. In fact, when I went down to do a walkthrough with the federal government, someone yelled, "Run." You could hear a building that sounded like it was going to collapse. So you have all of the first responders and federal government, and we take off running because it sounded like this building is literally about to come down on us. I don't turn to look at the building. I just know I need to get away and then look up after. So it's really unsafe down there. And so we have to figure out what we're going to do with those before people can come in and do work. It could be a long time coming before 2nd Avenue. We're going to try to condense it to just where the blast site is and areas that can have occupancy, which is going to be, I believe, from Commerce up to Church Street. It's going to be the affected area that really have most of the concentration. Everything else will hopefully get rebuilt a lot sooner.
I want to add this comment from Gary Gaston. Gary leads the Nashville Civic Design Center, and he says, "Thank you so much, for Chief Drake. As someone whose business was impacted by the damage, and having visited our 2nd Avenue building twice to assess the damage, I was so impressed with how everything was being handled by both the MNPD and FBI. A big thank you for all those."
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, and I have to give credit to the Downtown Partnership. Back during the civil unrest, we started a program where we could send out a mass text to everyone in the downtown core about what was going on, what to expect. So we use that tool to be able to communicate with downtown residents and how they could get in, how they could view their property. And we wanted to make sure they had access to be able to, one, see their property, but be able to start making decisions on how to repair. And so I thank him for that. And it's our honor to just be able to help them in such a critical time.
Okay, a couple of questions about the bomber's girlfriend, one from Marlene Escan-Moses and one from Greg Ramos. Their questions are, he says, it says that the police department didn't have enough information based on the tip to support the issuance of a search warrant. Is there anything that would have prevented MNPD from trying to obtain more information for the issuance of a search warrant, such as conducting surveillance at Mr. Quinn's residence?
So all we had at the time is we had officers that responded to a suicidal call. They went, they encountered the lady that had called. She had 2 guns on the porch. She had mentioned to them that this person was making bombs. The officers did not take her statement lightly, that she had some concerns for care. So they went up, knocked on the door, and when officers knock on the door, they knock loud. They want to make sure if you're inside, they want you to hear. They made a report, which means they went even further, which calls for a follow-up. We had a hazardous device team that went, and for several days, they conducted surveillance. They went through to try to encounter Mr. Warner. But what we learned is he would leave for, and this is after the fact, but he would leave for weeks on end to go camping, to go do things. And so you had a person that made the complaint that you couldn't talk to anymore, and an individual that you couldn't talk to. It was turned over to the Specialized Investigations Division, who in turn looked at it. They contacted the FBI, who looked at it, saying it wasn't any more that could be done. So instead of giving up, the officer with the hazardous device unit contacted the attorney to say, "Hey, can we look around? Can we see?" And he said, "No, we're not going to be able to let you do that." And so at that point, you have an individual who's anti-police, anti-government, who wouldn't have granted permission. You have an attorney who's not going to grant permission. The only thing we have at that point is to violate his civil rights. And so you kind of at a bad spot is where do you stop? Do you violate his rights? And he turns out not to be making bombs. And now people say, well, this is what you guys do to everybody anyway. Or do you stop? And so it was still open. It just didn't have any more they could go on. The lady, from what I've learned from the FBI, who made the allegation, from what I hear, got back in some type of relationship with Mr. Warner. And so no other calls came after that. So it's really no more to go on. They've done surveillance and everything else. So we're doing an after action report. That just gives us the ability to look at the first call all the way through to the very end to see if there was any gaps or anything we could have done differently.
Okay, a question from Joyce Searcy. Joyce is with Belmont University. Joyce says, I love your plan for diversity and inclusion. We all read or heard the criticism by women officers about the way they have been treated by some male officers. What specifically are you doing to train male officers to improve treatment of women officers?
So we're training the entire police department. And so not only our male officers, the first thing we did is that we had one of our deputy chiefs. She brought in all of the female officers in groups of 20 and 25. She's still working on that to talk about their worth, their importance to the department, their contribution, but also if they have any type of concerns, allegations, or problems, how they could go through a hotline. We established a hotline through our HR division where they could call in any complaints of sexual harassment. We also, they can call the chief of police, which is me, anytime they want. Also, I agree that we can have outside elements investigated, Human Relations Commission, Family Safety Center, and others, COB, if they want to. We also had training with the YWCA, came out, did a mandatory training for all officers, including myself. I viewed the video. I'm a member of You Have the Power. We're going to ask them to do training as well. And we've had Wright come out for all of our officers too. So we've taken several different layers. We're not done yet, just to ensure, one, we eliminate that culture and provide a better avenue for all our employees.
Okay, let's see. A question from Abe and Bo. Abe is with Skilled Workforce, and I love this question. I feel like it gets asked at every Rotary meeting. Abe says, thanks for taking time to speak with us today. What does community involvement look like from your standpoint for Nashville business owners? How can we help?
So business owners can be a part of the collaborations, part of the community engagement. They know where their problems are as well, but then they also can help with funding in areas. I would like to get to where we had a real-time crime center, to where we had cameras throughout the city, where we had license plate readers, and very possible we could look at the private community and business owners to get into that, and to where it can help us fight crime. I was talking to a council member over the weekend in Dayton, just with license plate readers alone, crime had dropped almost 40%, violent crime. And so, as you know, the debate is, whether we should have, LPRs or not. I think if we can get the private sector involved with helping with some of this, it's going to help us move forward in reducing violent crime a lot sooner.
Thank you so much, Chief Drake. I have a whole slew of comments and people who are so excited that you are a new chief of police that I will send to you after, and I will turn it over to Richard.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Drake. I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate your commitment to Nashville, and always enjoy spending a little time in Swanee with you for another group. But anyway, in honor of your time here, we're going to make a contribution to the Rotary International Foundation. I'm sure you know all about that.
I do.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Coming up, we have a service project with Project Cure on Friday the 8th. Our next virtual Rotary meeting on Monday will be with District Governor April Lieberman. We've got a service project with backpacks at Second Harvest on Friday the 15th, and we will not have a virtual Rotary meeting on the 18th in honor of Martin Luther King Day. And finally, January 25th, we will have a virtual Rotary meeting with Mike Ritz with the National Leadership Network. Thank you all. Have a great week. We are adjourned.